Welcome to the France 24 Observers. This week we have a special edition from Ivory Coast in West Africa. Our team from Paris went there to work with our Ivorian observers on the country's legislative elections. It was the first vote since a presidential standoff brought the country to the brink of civil war. And now longtime President Laurent Gbagbo is at The Hague in Holland facing war crimes charges, and his opponent Alassane Ouattara is president. Our observers spent time on the ground talking to other Ivorians about their hopes for the future, but also about the atrocities that were committed by both sides during the crisis. We start with a report from one of our best observers, Conan, a video that until now was passed from phone to phone in a neighborhood of Abidjan.
We went to the Yopougon of Abidjan to observe the voting at a polling station. It was in the Decouraye neighborhood. We were amazed when we got there. We saw an open grave. We walked around and took photos, and no one stopped us. Then one man came up to us and said he had video on his phone showing what had happened. He transferred it using Bluetooth. We watched the video. He told us it showed people who'd been killed just after Gbagbo was arrested on the 12th of April by members of a militia. The video showed the burial. You see people and a grave, a mass grave, bodies being buried in the ground. You could see that it looked like the burial site we'd seen. We hadn't been able to tell how many bodies were in there. So it helped us understand just what it was we were looking at.
The United Nations has concluded that the massacre was probably perpetrated by supporters of former President Gbagbo. But horrible things were also done by the other side. We head now to the Abobo district, where our observer Lassinon met with members of the so-called Invisible Commando, which fought against Gbagbo's forces.
We wanted to see what had become of the Invisible Commandos, so we went to Abobo, to the PK-18 district, where their base is. We met a commander who called himself Commander Ferret. We wanted to find out what had happened to all the young fighters who'd been with the group during the crisis. He explained that the Invisible Commandos hadn't disappeared. He said they fanned out across the neighborhood and joined various groups who are working with the official police, helping them patrol. They're trying to help impose order now in Abobo and even in other parts of Abidjan. Sometimes they even help out the regular army. They're expecting a lot from the government. They patrol on a volunteer basis without getting paid. Some of them want to join the regular army. They're waiting to be enlisted. Others want to put down their weapons and go back to the jobs they had before the crisis. We met another commander who's organized a new group called the CCL, which stands for the Freedom Fighters Company. The group includes local commanders from across Abobo who are trying to get together to keep the young fighters from causing trouble.
Now for the election itself. Our observer Ghislaine spent the day touring Abidjan's polling stations. She says it was like touring a desert.
I went to go vote on election day, and while I was at it, I decided to do a little research and see how many people turned up, cast their ballots. When I arrived at my polling place, I saw that it was still quite empty, even though it was already about 10:30 in the morning. So I decided to ask the people who were there why they thought so few people had turned up, especially since during the presidential election, these polling places were packed. Most people said, oh, maybe it's because of Mass, people will come after they get out of church. But I waited a few more hours and it remained just as empty. People really just didn't seem very interested in the parliamentary elections. They didn't see how voting or not voting made any difference. There were some people who outright boycotted the elections, while others simply decided not to bother.
We finish the show with some photos and personal accounts from the other observers we work with in Ivory Coast.
I live in Kumasi. I heard they were trying to fight illegal street vendors there. So I went to Kumasi's main intersection to watch the local cleanup crew at work. When the clean-up crew arrived, we saw that the street vendors started to flee. They were scared that the clean-up crew would confiscate their wares. The crew stayed for a while, during which time the area stayed entirely empty of vendors. But as soon as they left, the vendors once again took over the intersection. It got very crowded and dirty again. I would like the country's health minister to allocate more funds to the clean-up crews in order to discourage illegal vendors from setting up shop in the street. As I was covering the elections, I decided to take a closer look at garba. Garba is the most popular dish in Abidjan, and it's becoming less and less affordable. Before the crisis, you could get a plate of garba for 200 francs, but today it's nearly impossible to find one for less than 350 francs. I went to a garba shop in town to try and find out more about this. The garba vendor told me that he had no choice but to hike prices because the price of oil has gone up. It's true, oil and other basic foodstuffs have gotten more expensive, so to make any profit he has to sell expensive garbas. I believe that this is caused by the wave of inflation that has been felt around the world. Still, it's interesting to see that the authorities are trying to figure out ways to make the price of garba go down, so that Ivorians can eat enough.
That's all for this week. We'd like to thank Canal France International, which supported our special project in Abidjan. And as always, make sure to send in your comments and contributions to our website. It's observers.france24.com. See you next time.